Racist cops assault 7-year-old black girl in a wheelchair, unaware her father is a police captain. Imagine this. What would you do if your child, defenseless in a wheelchair, became the target of suspicion from those sworn to protect her? It was a bright and peaceful day at Lincoln Park. Families strolled along the paths, children laughed and played, and the air was filled with the sound of joy. Among them was Amara, a 7-year-old black girl, sitting in her wheelchair with a bright pink unicorn toy clutched in her small hands. Her giggles, innocent and carefree, filled the air as her father David watched from a nearby bench. But peace doesn't last long in a world where prejudice lurks beneath the surface. Out of nowhere, 2 officers appeared, their demeanor cold and calculated. They walked directly toward Amara. Their eyes scanned her up and down, and their faces tightened with suspicion. What could a child in a wheelchair possibly do to draw this kind of attention? The officers stopped in front of her. "Hey, you," one of them barked. Amara's laughter faded. Confused, she looked around, thinking they must be speaking to someone else. "What's in the wheelchair?" the officer demanded. His tone was sharp and accusing. Amara blinked, clutching her unicorn tighter. "It's just me and my unicorn," she replied softly. But the officers didn't listen. "We've had reports of suspicious activity," the second officer said, his hand inching toward her wheelchair. Suspicious activity? From a 7-year-old girl? A crowd began to gather, their murmurs growing louder. "Now, what would you do if strangers treated your child like a criminal, ignoring her innocence, ignoring her disability, ignoring her humanity?" David noticed the commotion and rose to his feet. His sharp eyes took in the situation in an instant. He began to walk toward his daughter, but the officer's actions stopped him in his tracks. Without warning, one of them grabbed the armrest of Amara's wheelchair, making her cry out. "Stop!" Amara screamed. "You're hurting me." David's blood boiled. "Hey!" he yelled, his voice booming. "What do you think you're doing to my daughter?" The officers turned to him, startled. "Sir, stay out of this," one officer said dismissively. Dismissively, like he was just another bystander. They didn't know who they were dealing with. David's voice cut through their arrogance like a knife. "She's 7. She's in a wheelchair. And she's my daughter. What could possibly be suspicious about her?" The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but didn't let go of Amara's wheelchair. "We have protocol," one of them muttered, but his words carried no conviction. David reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge. The sight of it made both officers freeze. "I'm Captain David Moore," he said, his voice icy, "and you've just assaulted my daughter. What's your excuse now?" The silence was deafening. The officer stepped back, suddenly realizing the gravity of their actions. David crouched down to comfort Amara, who was crying. Can you imagine the rage, the helplessness of a father who has to shield his child from the very people meant to protect her? But David didn't stop there. "Give me your badge numbers," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The crowd had grown, their phones held high, capturing every second. The officers stammered and hesitated, but the evidence was already out there. Would you let them walk away, or would you make sure they're held accountable for every single second of pain they caused your child? David did what any parent would do. He filed a formal complaint that same day. By the time he got home, the videos of the incident had gone viral. Headlines flashed across social media. Racist cops assault disabled black girl. Father exposes injustice. The outcry was immediate. People were enraged. Protests broke out in the community, demanding justice for Amara. But here's the real question. Would public outrage be enough to ensure justice, or would the system protect its own? The officers were placed on administrative leave pending investigation, but that wasn't enough for David. He held a press conference, standing alongside Amara, who bravely told her story to the world. "I was scared," she said, her voice trembling. "They didn't listen to me. They just hurt me." The crowd was silent, tears in their eyes. The pain in Amara's voice was a sharp reminder of the systemic issues that plague society. How many children, how many families have to endure this kind of pain before real change happens? The investigation moved quickly, thanks to the overwhelming public pressure. The officers were fired within weeks, and charges were filed against them for misconduct and child endangerment. But David wasn't satisfied with just their termination. He pushed for mandatory racial sensitivity and de-escalation training across the department. Those two officers thought they could get away with this because of Amara's skin color, David said during an interview. That's not just their problem. It's a systemic problem. The community rallied behind David and Amara. Their story became a rallying cry for change, sparking national conversations about racism, police brutality, and the treatment of disabled individuals. If this were your family, wouldn't you want to make sure it never happens to anyone else again? As weeks turned into months, the case became a symbol of accountability. Both officers faced court trials, and the department implemented sweeping changes, including a new oversight committee to address complaints of discrimination. Amara, though still scarred by the incident, found strength in the support of her community. She became an advocate for other disabled children, speaking out against injustice. What would you do if your greatest pain turned into your greatest purpose? The story of Amara and her father wasn't just about a single incident. It was about the power of standing up, speaking out, and demanding better. It was a reminder that change begins when we refuse to stay silent. And now the question is, will you stand up for what's right, or will you let injustice continue unchecked?